Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad you're able to join us today. I think we're going to have a very interesting traffic topic session. I've always liked hearing Brian and Jesse talk about what they do at the RTMC, and I'll go into a little bit of description of that. But while we're waiting for people to come in, I just had a couple of thoughts. You know, I hate it when people ask me what I'm doing in 5 years. I mean, it's not like I've got 20/20 vision. In 5 years is 20. I can only use that joke this year, you understand. Did you know, according to chemists, alcohol is a solution? Not them advocating that. No chuckles at all, okay. You know, I sometimes get asked how often I tell my chemistry jokes, and I have to reply periodically. It's because I sometimes don't get a reaction. Yeah, okay. And finally, you know, I've often wondered how Bono spells the word color, with or without you. Okay, that's an obscure one for music fans. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. These people are coming in and they're able to avoid those jokes. Okay, we're going to have Brian Carey and Jesse Larson talk, and I'm going to introduce them right now. Brian Carey is a freeway operations engineer, has worked with MnDOT since 1999, and has a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from the U of M. University of Minnesota. His work with MnDOT has included working in freeway operations, traffic analysis, and incident management. In his current position, Brian oversees the daily operations of the Regional Transportation Management Center, we always call that RTMC here, which includes the MnPass system, the FIRST program, ramp metering, and the freeway operations group. Jesse Larson will also be talking today, and he's got a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's been with MnDOT since 2007, and for the past 6 years has been the assistant freeway operations engineer at the RTMC. So please help me welcome our speakers.
Thank you, Ken. Again, I'm Jesse Larson. I work over in the RTMC in MnDOT's Metro District. Today we're going to talk about freeway congestion and some of the tools we use to improve freeway operations. A little overview of the presentation. We'll talk about the 2014 congestion report and the results from that report. We'll give an overview of the Regional Transportation Management Center and talk about some of the tools we use to improve freeway operations, including the FIRST program, ramp metering, dynamic message signs, our 511 system, smart lanes, and MnPass. The 2014 congestion report. It's based upon our traffic sensors out on the roadway. We have mainline vehicle detection stations every half mile on metro freeways throughout our system. We look at October data every year. This is a pretty normalized traffic month. There aren't any major holidays. Snow hasn't started yet. School's in session. There's not a lot of disruption to kind of the normal calendar in October. And we use Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays because we see generally on Mondays and Fridays a little bit lighter traffic. It's a little bit different travel pattern, but Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday is kind of the prime time. We look at 5-minute intervals, 5 a.m. to 10 a.m., and 2 and 7 in the afternoon. And we look at every one of those days for 5 minutes and use the median value of that time. So every day at 8, for that to 8:05, we look for that median value. So we're throwing out incident days or maybe it was raining someday, or any light days where there happen to be lighter traffic than normal. And anything under 45 miles per hour is considered congested. So we add up all those 5-minute totals, we get an hour and a half for a certain segment of congestion, and that goes in the report. And here's the overall scorecard showing the trends since 1993. In 2014, we saw 21.1% of the freeway system congested. This was up slightly from the year prior, but pretty well in line with the past 5 years. And we've seen on our system, and nationally we've seen vehicle miles traveled has kind of leveled off since about 2008. And we're seeing some of the similar things in congestion trends in the metro. Congestion is somewhat leveled off. It's still increased from over the past 10 years, but our 5-year trend is pretty flat. And here's a map showing the AM peak period congestion for 2014. In Green, I've highlighted areas that have improved. This includes areas on 35E in the North Metro and 35W north of Highway 36. In red, I've highlighted some areas that have seen congestion increase. The AM peak this year saw less increase in congestion than the PM did, and I'll show that next. But you can see some areas on 494 and 169 in the West Metro, and 694 in the East Metro has kind of popped up as an area of congestion in the area that's congested in the AM, and we attributed some of that to the construction that's on 35E ongoing right now. Here's our map of PM peak period congestion, and you can see there's a lot more red circles on this map showing areas that congestion increased. And we saw the greatest increase in congestion in the PM. One area that I'd like to note is the 494 in the West Metro. That south of 394, that area was reconstructed less than 10 years ago, and we saw no congestion, but over the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen congestion kind of increase in that area. Now, there are a lot of other studies out there, and we often get questions about them related to congestion in the metro area. One of the most recent was the 2014 TomTom Traffic Index. This is generated from GPS data. It showed traffic congestion in the metro area, in the Twin Cities metro area, up 2% from 2013. It ranked us 35th out of 53 U.S. cities it studied, and it showed 63 hours of delay per year per commuter. The 2013 INREX National Traffic Scorecard report is also generated from GPS data, and it showed a much larger increase in traffic volume, 17% in the metro area, 14% increase in delay. It ranked us 16th in the nation among U.S. cities, but showed 24.5 hours of delay per year, much lower than the TomTom report. And another one is the Texas Transportation Institute Urban Mobility Report. It uses GPS data and some of our own loop detector data that they acquire, and it ranked us 44th in the nation with 34 hours of delay per year. And what I really want to highlight in this is that you can see through these studies there's kind of a wide variety of where we rank in the nation: 35th, 16th, or 44th, and the hours delay 63, 24, 34. So these reports that you often hear about using this GPS data, we're not quite sure how much probe data they have for our area, how robust it is, how accurate it really is, and the results kind of show that. The estimates for delay are all over the board, and where we rank as a major city in the U.S. for congestion is kind of all over the place too. But our congestion report has stayed pretty consistent throughout the years, and it's because we have really robust detection on our entire system, and we're able to really get good results, good information from that. So now we come to the Regional Transportation Management Center. It's a shared use facility. It has 3 main groups: MnDOT Freeway Operations, MnDOT Maintenance Dispatch, and the State Patrol Dispatch and 911 Call Center. MnDOT's Freeway Operations Unit has several main objectives. One is to maximize the number of vehicles a freeway corridor can handle. We want to minimize congestion, provide traveler information, manage incidents and special events, and provide aid to stranded motorists. One of our main tools is the Freeway Incident Response and Safety Team, used to be known as our highway helpers. They reduce traffic congestion on the freeway by clearing incidents and removing stalls and debris from freeways. They assist the State Patrol with traffic control at major incidents. They patrol about 400 miles of Twin Cities freeways. They're out there on weekdays between 4 a.m. and 8:30 p.m. We have about 8 first trucks in the morning, they're in the AM peak, during the AM hours, and about 11 routes in the afternoon. On weekends, we have 1 route that goes late mornings to early evenings, and we have 1 person in the dispatch center as well. And here's a map of our system showing the first routes. We try to cover as much as we can. We've got some overlapping routes around major incident areas, heavy congested areas. You can see they overlap in downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul and some other areas as well. Another tool we use are ramp meters. MnDOT started testing ramp meters in the late 60s, early 70s. Today our system includes over 420 ramp meters located throughout the metro area. Our metering rates adjust every 30 seconds and are based on real-time traffic conditions. I know this is hard to see, but this kind of just shows the entire system and where our ramp meters are located. And it's kind of put that up there to show that we have them in all areas of the metro. It's not just located in the urban core or anything like that. We have about 155 running during the AM peak and about 170 running during the PM peak. Over the years, MnDOT has used several different algorithms to control the ramp meters. In the 1990s, we had something called the zone metering algorithm, and this was based upon historical demand on ramps. So we would go out there, we'd count traffic, we'd come back, enter in some metering rates based upon the demand, and when traffic got congested on the main line, it would use a lower rate. If it was not very congested, it would use a higher rate. And this worked pretty well to minimize congestion on the main line, but it caused problems on the ramp. So we made some improvements and came up with a stratified zone metering algorithm. This used detectors on the ramp to calculate demand, so demand was kind of shifting throughout the peak period as it normally does. And it looked at up to about 3 miles downstream from the ramps and tried to regulate the volume entering the freeway so that there was, in congested areas, less volume exiting the zone than there was entering it. So it's looking at all the exits and entrances from the ramps and trying to balance that volume. So it ran off volume, which is kind of problematic. Volume, you can have 1,500 vehicles running per hour in a lane that are free flow, or you can have 1,500 vehicles per hour running in a lane when it's congested, when they're going slower. So you need some more information to decide whether it's congested on the main line or uncongested. You'd have to add speed. Also, some of the ramp backups, we were trying to limit backups onto side streets, and when the detector at the top of the ramp found that the ramp was backing up, it would start to flush out that queue of cars. And so it would flush them out right away. It didn't have a very good ability to monitor the queue and proactively manage the queue. So it was kind of just dumping them out there, which isn't really good for congestion either. So we came up with a new algorithm, and then we've just implemented this in the last couple of years. We started testing it in 2014, and it's based upon density. So we're looking at the number of vehicles per mile per lane, and the density just goes from 0 up to 200. So you know once you get up to a certain threshold that you're now congested and on the main line, and you need to control the ramp as best you can. We also added a lot of ramp queue management. So we're estimating the wait time of each vehicle that enters the ramp. We're estimating how long the queue on the ramp is. And as the queue gets bigger and it starts to get to the top of the ramp, we're gradually adjusting the metering rates up to try to let more vehicles out so we don't reach that point where we get to the top and we're going to cause a safety concern with backing up onto side streets. So like before, we kind of just dumped the vehicles out, tried to clear them out, saying we don't want to cause that backup. Now we're proactively trying to increase the metering rate to let more out so that it doesn't fill up. Here's an example of our ramp meter system and what the inputs and outputs are. You can see the detectors spaced about every half mile on the freeway. We have a detector at the top of the ramp measuring how many vehicles are coming in. We have a detector at the bottom measuring how many are leaving. We also have detectors on the exit ramps. And we're looking about 3 miles downstream from the ramp. And the closer the congestion is to the ramp, the more restrictive that ramp will be. And we're trying to balance the density on the main line. MnDOT has set some policies in place for the ramp meters. We limit the wait on the ramps to 4 minutes, or we limit the wait on freeway-to-freeway ramps to 2 minutes, knowing that some of those vehicles might have already waited at a ramp to get onto the freeway system, and now they're going to another ramp. We don't want to make that wait longer than we have to. But we do see some benefits to metering some freeway-to-freeway interchanges. We aim that vehicles waiting at meters will not back up on the adjacent roadways. We don't want to cause safety problems on those side streets with backed up traffic. The meters operate and respond to congestion and operate only when needed. That was another big improvement to our new algorithm, is that it's looking at mainline traffic conditions when it should turn on, and then after it's turned on, it's looking for those traffic congestion to go back down to a level that we find safe and turning them back off. It'll then continue to monitor the traffic throughout the peak period. If it needs to turn back on again, it will. There might be a situation where there's a factory and they have shift workers and they're letting them out a lot at a certain time, and then once that traffic dissipates, there might be another shift that gets out, so that freeway might see congestion a couple times during the peak, but separated by some time, so we can have the ramp meters really respond to that in real time and not just have it on unnecessarily. And we've seen great improvements, especially around like Thanksgiving weekend or Thanksgiving week, where traffic is a lot lighter, and some areas might see some congestion, but it might be only 20 minutes of congestion compared to the hour. The ramp meters now are only metering for maybe a half hour, trying to dissipate that congestion, where before they would have run throughout till the end of the peak period. We also have limited hours of operation for our ramp meters. We can only operate them during the AM and the PM peak. A lot of these policies were brought on by the ramp meter shutdown study. So limiting the weight on the ramps, making sure we didn't back up on the side streets was something that was really put into the system due to the ramp meter shutdown study. But the ramp meter shutdown study also really proved the benefits of ramp metering the metro freeways. It was a legislatively mandated study in 2000. It studied two different conditions, with ramp meters for 5 weeks and without ramp meters for 5 weeks. And they allowed 1 week in between to let traffic kind of normalize to what it would be like without ramp meters. The results from that study showed improved peak throughput by 14%, improved freeway travel times by 20%. One of the big ones was reduced crashes by 25%. And on our system, that prevents about 4 crashes a day. The reduced congestion resulted in reduced emissions and fuel consumption. Cost-benefit study was performed, looking at using parameters such as travel time, crashes, emissions, fuel consumption, and travel time reliability. At the time, the annual cost to operate the ramp meters was $2.6 million. With total benefits estimated at $40 million, it came out to a 15-to-1 benefit cost ratio to operate the ramp meters. Another tool we employ are dynamic message signs. We have about 180 of them on the Metro Freeway network, and we use them to provide real-time traveler information to the public. Some of the applications are for incident management. We'll put up messages telling people that there's a crash ahead, which lane it might be in, if they need to use other routes, if the road's closed. We're really trying to get the message out to them before they get to that slowed traffic, that there is something ahead. They should be on the lookout for it, where it might be, if it's on their route, even if it's 5-10 miles down the road. We also, during the AM and PM peak period, we display travel times to give people information on what their commute's going to be like. We also have some signs that are able to show alternate routes, one of them being 35 before 35W split down in Burnsville. People can look at what it would take on 35W or 77 to get to 494, and if one of them is highly congested that day, they can make the choice to choose another route. We also display messages related to maintenance and construction activities, some special events if they impact freeway traffic. We also display public service announcements. We do have a policy where we limit the number of public service announcements. We don't want the signs lit up all the time. People start to ignore them if they're constantly on, and we want our messages to be read when we put them up there. So we limit the number of days we do public service announcements, and we also limit them to being in conjunction with more statewide or national campaigns. So if you see a sign up and it says, wear your seatbelt, you'll probably hear a radio advertisement or see a commercial on TV saying click it or ticket just as well around the same time. We also have some specialty dynamic message signs out there. We have signs related to our MnPass system. We also have some signs leading to the Mall of America, and these are to help with traffic flow leading into the Mall of America on the ramps. It kind of tells them which ones ramps might be full, so what exits to use to get there during heavy usage times. We also have some ramps leading into the Minneapolis parking ramps off of 94 and 394. And now for some of our other tools, I'm going to hand it over to Brian Carey.
All right, thank you, Jesse. Now I'll talk a little bit more in detail about MnPass and also cover some of our smart lanes and 511 system. So our MnPass lanes, the existing lanes are on 394 and 35W. This is a map from our transportation policy plan. The corridors in green are the existing corridors. The one in yellow is our future corridor currently under construction, 35E, north of downtown St. Paul. First stretch opening up this fall, late fall, from downtown to roughly 36, and then another phase will open up then next November or so when we complete the lanes all the way up to County Road J. The ones in purple in various stages of study. Some of them are maybe further along than others. Probably the one that's the most furthest along is 35W North from 36 up to 95th Avenue. That would be a corridor that we'd be looking at probably in the later part of the decade of being probably the fourth MnPass corridor. If you're not too familiar with MnPass, what MnPass is they're express lanes that provide a faster, safer, more reliable travel option for commuters. They're basically built off of our existing carpool lanes, which were seen to be underutilized. The carpool lanes were built for transit, for carpoolers, and for motorcycles. Those vehicles still have the advantage to use the MnPass express lane for free, but now we're able to provide that extra capacity to single occupant vehicles too that are willing to pay the toll or the fee. So in this example, in this picture, this is from 394, and it would be on eastbound 394 approaching 100. You can see two destinations are listed, 1 to 100, 1 to 94. So if you were traveling to Highway 100 in this example, you would pay $1.25. If you're traveling to 94, you'd pay $1.75. If you get off anywhere between there, say you got off before 100 and maybe exited to Louisiana, you still pay for that full segment, and you pay that $1.25 price. The price can average anywhere from, or can range anywhere from 25 cents to $8, and that price varies depending on the demand in the MnPass lane. So it's actually based off of the volumes that are in that lane. So if the demand is low and we want to encourage more use, the price goes down. As the demand increases, we want to maintain the flow in that lane, so we want to discourage some of the demand and use of that lane, so we'll start to raise up the price. We're really trying to aim for a travel speed of 45 miles an hour or greater. Typically we're running them at about 55 or so. And the idea is really it's still the benefits of a carpool lane and a transit lane, where we're trying to move as many people as possible, not as many vehicles as possible. So we want to keep that advantage for the carpools and the transit customers. Average price is around that probably $1.60, $1.70 range. So this example in the picture is a pretty typical example of what you'd see out there. When we talk about use and performance, like I said, the purpose of the MnPass lanes is to really move more people, and so we're really looking at the number of transit and carpoolers. We like to sometimes think of MnPass lanes, when we talk about MnPass lanes, a lot of people think right away of the tolling aspect of it, but in reality, majority of the users are actually using the lane for free as transit or carpools, as the pie charts here show. The one on the left is the number of vehicles moved in that lane. 56% of them are carpoolers, with 32% of them are MnPass customers. So they really don't make up a majority of the vehicles. The carpoolers still make up the majority of the vehicles. As you get to people moved, that yellow sliver, which was 5%, is the buses. But when you look at the number of people moved, the buses make up 41%, and then carpoolers make up 44%, and really the number of people paying are 12% now. And you always got a little bit of violators. We do have dedicated enforcement out there to try to prevent that. We can't catch them all. You can see that about 7% of the vehicles in the lane we do recognize as violators. That can vary depending on time of day and location on the corridor, but average, that's about what we see, is about a 7% violation rate, which compared to similar lanes throughout the country is actually very good. Another way of looking at it for person throughput, this is comparing the MnPass lane to the general purpose lanes. This is at a couple of different locations. One in northbound 35W at Lake Street. There you've got 4 general purpose lanes and 1 MnPass lane, which is actually operating on the price dynamic shoulder at that location. At that location, our general purpose lanes are moving an average of 1,800 people per hour per lane. And when you look at the MnPass lane with the amount of transit use in that corridor, it's about 4,200 people in that one lane. So we're really moving about twice the number of people in a MnPass lane as one of those general purpose lanes, actually slightly more than twice. Similar example on 394 at Penn. This is within the reversible section. So we've got 3 general purpose lanes and 2 MnPass lanes that are reversible, eastbound in the morning, westbound at night. There we're seeing similar numbers, 1,800 vehicles in the general purpose lanes, or 1,800 people, I should say. And then in those MnPass lanes, we're seeing an average of about 2,900 people across those 2 MnPass lanes there at that location. We also look at reliability and travel time savings. There's certainly a travel time savings that you can get by utilizing MnPass as a MnPass customer or as a carpooler. But it's not only about that travel time savings you get on a typical day. It's really about the reliability factor, that you can kind of plan for your trip and know that you're going to always get a consistent travel time on that corridor. In the general purpose lanes, if you were traveling from Lakeville to downtown, you'd have to plan on about a 28-minute travel time to assume that you're going to get to work or your destination on time a majority of the days. So you got to take care of any variability that might occur due to rain like today, or maybe a minor crash that could start impacting congestion levels on the corridor. In the MnPass lane, you only have to plan on 14 minutes, so that's a lot more time savings that you have, and you'll know that it's going to be much closer to that 14-minute time period because that lane is being managed to maintain that 45 to 55 mile an hour speed and maintain a travel time that's very consistent with that. That also helps transit, helps their operations, their operational costs. They don't need to add more buses to serve the same number of people, and it also makes transit a more attractive option to customers because they can see that they can know that they're going to get to their destination when they anticipate getting there from their transit trip. This graph just shows the number of MnPass customers and the number of tolled trips that have been used on 394 and 35W, so it's to kind of show that there is growth in the corridor. The blue bars are the 394 corridor, which opened up in 2005, and then the gray bars that start stacking on top of that in 2009 are the 35W corridor. 35W opened in late September of 2009, so just a little sliver in that year, but you can see it grows quite a bit then as you get to 2010. And both corridors are continuing to see some growth. Before I move on to smart lanes, I'll just say a couple more things about MnPass. In addition to opening our 3rd corridor here in the next year, or in the next couple of months for the first phase of it, we're also looking at really revamping our entire MnPass system. We're rebuilding the technology and a lot of the software that's behind the scenes in anticipation of making the system interoperable with other toll systems. We're probably still a couple of years away from that because there's a lot of things that the industry has to do to kind of get prepared for that. But really the goal is that at some point in the not too distant future here, you'll be able to use a MnPass transponder, like say in Chicago, or an iPass or EasyPass transponder from the Chicago area up here on a MnPass lane. And then there'll be transactions going back and forth between the different states. But for the user, you only have to worry about having one tag. And for people who travel a lot, especially between here and the Chicago area, that can be very convenient to just have one tag as opposed to having 2 separate tags and 2 separate accounts. So now under the smart lane system, smart lanes are on 35W and 994. These are the intelligent lane control signals that you see in those corridors. If you're not familiar with it, if you look at the picture there, you can see the black boxes that are over each lane. That's our lane control signal. They're basically a full color matrix sign. They're a 4-foot by 5-foot sign. We've got 187 of them on 35W and 110 on 84. In the picture, you can also see that they're spaced about every half mile. This is looking north from Highway 13 across the river valley, and you can kind of see the sign structures there off in the distance that where each of the lane control structures are at. Primarily used for incident management. We do also use them for designating when our dynamic shoulder lane is open, and also utilize them for the variable speed limits. These are some of the messages that you would see on those smart lane signs. You would first, as you were driving down the corridor, you'd encounter the sign like in the lower left that says lane closed ahead. And then after that, you would see one of the merge arrows that you see on the right that would be directing you to either the right or the left or both to get around that incident or blockage, whatever was occurring there. And then you would see a red X with the close indication just immediately before that incident scene or road work or maintenance or whatever the event was that was blocking that lane. And then other lanes that were were not affected by the incident or not blocked, there'd be a yellow flashing arrow in the adjacent lane showing that you can still use it to slow and use caution, and then the green are just lanes that are open to traffic. We also had the speed limit system, which then provides some indication as to what travel speeds are downstream and gets people to start to slow down and warn them of congestion up ahead. And we also have the white diamond that designates when the MnPath lane is restricted or open to traffic. So when it's restricted, the white diamond comes up. When it's open to all traffic, the white diamond goes down. Ken?
I think there's confusion related to the speed limit. Is it a speed limit or is it an advisory speed? And what?
It's an advisory speed. It's yellow and black, so it's not regulatory. So it's just advisory at this point in time. We're kind of still experimenting with it, so we didn't want to make it regulatory at the time that we deployed the system. It would have also required some legislative change to have kind of a variable speed limit like that. So it's really just kind of advisory to advise you that there's a queue downstream. So. It's a test system. It's a system that's really been deployed a lot in Europe, and this was the first system to be deployed of its kind in the U.S., the second system being in Seattle, and it's really those two systems are the only one in existence in the United States right now. There's a couple of them that are in different design or study phases, but it's us in Seattle are the only ones that are currently operating. To get a little bit more into the advisory speed limits, as we talked about, it's advisory only, it's not regulatory. We didn't want to make it regulatory not only because of that legislative requirement, but we also wanted it to be more of a traveler information system to warn motorists of conditions downstream, and that we didn't really feel like we needed to truly regulate that and try to figure out enforcement issues around that. The system basically detects slow-moving traffic downstream and then comes up with a recommended speed limit to gradually slow people down as they approach that queue. A couple of things that can happen with that. One, if you can, in theory, if you can slow traffic down as they come into a bottleneck, you can actually improve the throughput on a corridor. That was seen in Europe a lot. We really haven't seen that here, and a lot of it is because we've already squeezed as much capacity out of the system as we can through our ramp metering system. Also, with a lot of the systems in Europe, they were just deploying the speed limit system. They didn't have ramp metering, and they didn't deploy that as part of this, so it was just solely that speed limit system. So if you look at like those two systems combined, you're not going to really stack those two benefits. It's really kind of some overlapping benefits, so we've probably squeezed as much out as we can. So we didn't see that in terms of increased throughput or capacity. Another difference with Europe is they tend to have more like a 4 to 5 mile space between interchanges, and on this corridor we're probably more in the 1 mile and even half mile in some segments. So I think in that type of situation where you've got a very dense interchange spacing, ramp metering is going to be a much more effective tool, and that's what we've seen historically. It's also very cost effective too. It's a much cheaper system to install as well. The speeds can be posted up to 1.5 miles upstream to start warning motorists. Some of the things that we're learning with the system is that's maybe a little bit too soon, that people aren't really following it that far back anyway. The hope is to maybe at least get their attention and start to have them pay more attention to the road. Another issue that we've seen is that it just isn't responding fast enough. That the current detection that we have out there, it brings the data back in 30 seconds. And 30 seconds may seem kind of quick, but as that queue is propagating back, especially after an incident, that can be quite some time. To the point that traffic might already be stopped under that sign that's already saying 45 or 50 miles an hour. And so we've suspended the system for now until we can look at deploying some new detection methods and maybe making some changes to our algorithm and kind of taking some lessons learned from what we've learned so far in the past and trying to apply that knowledge now and then reactivate it hopefully not too far down the road and get the system running again. Another thing we're looking at doing too is rather than just a speed limit, maybe having a message like slow traffic or stop traffic ahead, more like what we do with some of our work zone areas, just a little bit more of a commonly understood message rather than just posting 50 and not really explaining what that means, hoping that the motorist understands that. And I think the everyday commuter probably does, but if you're kind of new to the corridor, you might not quite understand what that message means. They've seen similar kind of results in Seattle. They really haven't seen any increase in throughput. In terms of crashes, we haven't seen much of a difference there. Seattle was seeing a little bit of a difference when they really dug into it on their weekends. It was not so much during the weekdays, but on weekends they felt that with maybe the more unfamiliar traveler, when they were warning people that there was a queue ahead, that it was getting people to pay more attention to the road and starting to be prepared to hit the brakes if need be. Their system is a little bit different, though, in that in addition to displaying like a 50-mile-an-hour or some sort of speed limit, they also have a small changeable message sign off over the right shoulder that is basically saying congestion ahead. So you kind of look at it as like, well, is it the congestion ahead sign or is it the speed limit sign that's really getting that positive benefit? And I think that's where we need to kind of look at it a little bit more closely before we reactivate the system. And at this point, we're not really looking to expand the system. We want to learn a little bit more about it before we do. But I think if we were to expand the system, we'd almost do like a smart lanes light, if you will, where instead of doing lane control every half mile, we might just look at doing more of that small changeable message sign every mile. A lot cheaper to install, a lot cheaper to operate, a lot cheaper to maintain, and not nearly as complex. And I think we can achieve similar benefits for a much lower cost. So that's kind of where we're headed in the future for our kind of smart lane system and what kind of the next step is in traffic management for us.
Brian,
Yes.
question. Sorry, if you're talking about that, would you still have the lane arrows and the crosses and things like that with the variable speed or the advisory speeds on the side, or?
No, what we'd be looking at is not even doing like the lane control signals. You just have like right now our overhead message signs, for example, are the big boards that are 30 feet wide. Those are spaced about every 5 or 6 miles. Maybe we have smaller signs that are like maybe not 30 feet but 18 feet that are spaced more every mile, and you don't get that lane by lane. But you can still get that same information across saying crash ahead, left lane closed, or center lane closed, or whatever like that. And the thought being is that you can get a similar result and get that similar warning out to motorists without having so much infrastructure needs.
Just from the Temporary Traffic Control side, we kind of like the fact those lane control signals are there because it helps the driver understand that they're coming out to do some planned construction. So
Yeah, and it's expensive. It's the Cadillac, and so we're trying to see, what can you get by with a Chevy or something like that. It is a challenge to maintain as well. One of the things we're doing is we got the University of Minnesota kind of studying the compliance of these signs, because we do see a lot of times we put up that red X and we put up those arrows. We see a lot of people get out of the lane, but we see a lot of people who jump back into it because they start to see a lane that's flowing a little bit faster. Could be also because we're giving them mixed messages a little bit of get out of the lane, but also with some of the zipper merge but at least hopefully they're paying a little bit more attention and stuff like that. But what we want to look at is we know, okay, there's some general compliance to these lane control signals, but how much better is it above and beyond like just a normal DMS that just says lane closed ahead and which lane and stuff like that? So is it worth that added expense of going to this next step? And so I think that'll help maybe educate us a little better as to what greater benefit do we see with these, and is the cost justified to go to something like that? I think one area that it is definitely beneficial is in our price dynamic shoulder lane area. This is on the northbound stretch of 35W from 42nd Street into downtown. What this does is it allows us to utilize that inside shoulder as a lane of traffic during the peak hours. So it's really operating as our MnPass lane. If it wasn't for the fact that we did this PDSL, we would have had 5 lanes coming out of the Crosstown reconstruction project, basically going down to 4 lanes at 46th Street. That would have been a major bottleneck. We wouldn't have had the MnPass lane going into downtown. It would have stopped 3 miles shy of downtown. It would have been a real congestion nightmare on that corridor, and we wouldn't have been able to really fully utilize the capacity expansion that we were getting out of that Crosstown project. So by deploying this PDSL project, we were able to get a 5th lane of traffic in a 4-lane section and utilizing the technology to help operate that lane within the existing footprint. That piece of roadway with the shoulder reconstruction that we had to do and some of the catch basin reconstruction we had to do and the sign changes and the technology was somewhere around $17 million. So really a fraction of what the larger project is going to be to go back in there and rebuild that entire corridor with the Lake Street project that's coming up here in the next few years. And so we were able to get that benefit right away for a much lesser cost. Didn't take, nearly as long to construct, and we can, get the benefits well ahead of that kind of future project, because at that time when the PDSL was going, Lake Street was still a lot further out. Now it's looking like at, I think, 2017 timeframe. So at that point, when the Lake Street project does go, it'll be a permanent MnPass lane all the way through there, and the PDSL will go away, but it'll have served its purpose for those 7 or 8 years or so, where we wouldn't have had that major bottleneck at 42nd Street. So lastly, I want to get into some of the 511 enhancements that we've been working on over the last year. Some of these are recently deployed, and some of these are still kind of yet to come in the coming months. So give a little plug here for our 511 system. This piece has kind of been around for a while. It's the Personalizer 511. It's been around for a couple of years now, I'd say. If you're not familiar with it, I recommend checking it out. But if you go to the 511 website, there's the ability to actually sign up for an account. And with that account, you can personalize what your route is. So you can put in your home to work here at Water's Edge. You can then sign up for email or text alerts. And so you can set up like a time of day. So say you're on the road from 7:30 to 8 o'clock or something like that. You can set it up so that it'll only send you alerts during those hours, and then you can have your reverse trip at the end of the day and send you alerts during those hours. Coming soon is also Smart 511, so that'll kind of tie this personalized routes into the actual 511 phone system. So when you call the 511 phone system today, you got to go through all the voice prompts to get the proper corridor or the city that you're in, and sometimes those can be a little bit frustrating as the system doesn't quite understand you properly. So with the Smart 511, you plug in your phone number from like your cell phone, and so when you call into the system, it'll recognize your phone number from the caller ID, and then it'll automatically go right into your personalized route. So you don't have to go through that whole call tree and get to the proper menu to get the information you're looking for. It'll just jump right to it. Another piece that we're looking at with 511, there's winter road condition reporting that comes in from our maintenance snowplow operators. So you can look on for the entire state for the state highway system. It'll show you during the winter months that whether the roads are dry or slippery or wet or icy or snowpacked. We're going to supplement that information now with citizen reporting. This is something that a few states have started to do, like Idaho and Wyoming and Iowa. And so now we're getting into that as well. This will be go live this coming winter, where citizens can actually report on kind of those same personalized routes what conditions that they encountered as they were driving in on that corridor. And so now other motorists can then check in, and they'll not only see the MnDOT conditions that are reported, but they'll see the conditions that are reported by other motorists out there too. And so this is what it'll kind of look like. You'll click on that particular route, and then as a user that would be entering your commute and what you encountered with the weather conditions, you would just click on a few very simple boxes, very simple questions. It would ask, was your drive, was it clear, patchy, or completely covered? Was it covered in snow or ice or slushy? And then was it blowing, or was there rain, or was there dense fog or anything like that you can add to it as well. And then that would show up to other motorists like this, where this particular motorist is reporting that there were slushy patches on the roadway. It was snowing out. Next, we've got this CARS CAP. CAP is the Common Alert Protocol from the National Weather Service. Basically, it's a feed that we can capture that then populates our 511 page with any weather alerts that are going on out there. So in these two examples, you can see the little thunderclouds, one being a severe thunderstorm warning and one being a tornado warning. And so those will show up on the 511 page as well. Zooming in a little bit closer on the tornado warning, this is just an example that we were using in our test bed, but it'll show you kind of the path that the National Weather Service is reporting that they anticipate that tornado to be following. So not only do you see that on the website, but if you were to call 511 and your corridor, your route was going through that particular area, it would also notify you that there was a storm warning in that area. Cars Delay is a new feature that we're adding to this summer. Just came live just in a matter of last few weeks. The base map that we have that shows the congestion data on 511 is actually from Google. It's the red, yellow, green that you see on the map is Google information. It's not me, is it? It is me. It's always bad when a phone rings in my presentation. It's your own. So the information that we've got in that Google map, I'll back up a step here, got a little sidetracked there. So with the Google Map data, the Google Map data is utilizing not only our loop detector data, but they're also utilizing data from cell phone probes, mainly Android phones, or even if you have iPhone and you're using like the Google Maps, that's how they're getting their information. So the nice thing about it is that we're not just limited to the metro freeway system like we are with our instrumented system. We can provide information on local streets as well as MnDOT arterials or as well as outstate roads. So anywhere that somebody's, utilizing a phone, we can provide that information through Google Maps. Now, because we've built our 511 system on this Google Maps and we have a site license for Google, we can query that data. So if we've got a road construction project in a particular corridor, we can query the Google Map data and see what the travel times on that corridor are. So we can post this now on our 511 site where not only are we just saying, there's a road work from point A to point B, expect delays, we can actually say that there's a 5 or 10 or 15-minute delay. So we're doing this with work zones. We're also going to look at doing it for crashes and incidents, and it'll just provide a kind of a delay calculation, not the actual travel time through the corridor. So we look something like this. So you'd see the yellow icon showing where the road work is. The Google Map data already shows kind of the red, yellow, green as to where congestion is at. But if you were to click on that construction incident, we give credit to Google or blame to Google, I guess, if it's off. But we say Google shows a 3-minute delay westbound between this exit and that exit. Left lane is closed. So now it gives you much more information about that work zone and what kind of impacts you're encountering. Same thing for incidents here, too. Yeah. Well, we're using the detection for a couple different things. There's the probe data is looking pretty good that we can get a lot of travel time data and we can get a lot of speed data. As you get further out of the metro, you don't have enough probes out there that there's necessarily a probe out there all the time. If you're looking at maybe long-range trends, it's probably okay that you can kind of look at, many days together and get a sense for what typical congestion levels are like. The nice thing about the data in the metro, where we have loop detectors and wavetronics detectors, is that we can supplement that speed data with volume data. And right now, there's not really a good way to get that out of probe data, because not everybody on that corridor is going to have a cell phone currently activated. So to get like some of the information we have now where we can show you lane by lane volumes and exiting and entering volumes, that's still a long ways to come with some of that probe data. This is just an example from a crash that is also reporting a delay in that corridor. ARWIS stations was just added a couple of weeks ago, so we've had 80-some ARWIS stations throughout the state that MnDOT's been operating. We've now incorporated those into 511, so you can see the pavement conditions and the temperatures as well as the camera image that ARWIS station is providing throughout the state. And then we have our segments program. This is what our maintenance and state patrol dispatchers are utilizing to flip those road conditions into our system. We basically just cleaned it up a little bit to make it a little bit more user-friendly. That's going to be something we're going to add this winter. So that's all the new things that we have coming with 511, kind of a summary of what Jesse and I and the other folks over at the RTMC do. So I don't know if we have time for questions or what do you?
We absolutely have time for questions. So.
Okay. John.
Is construction able to be factored in or factored out? In other words, closing a segment of E between I-94 and 694, ramp 36 from E. So the person isn't on the road, they're on Rice or they've been diverted somewhere. So, they're personally experiencing congestion yet. Measurements have been showing that there's no congestion on E right now. Well, we've got a ramp closed. Is that able to be figured out and factored in from year to year, so you know how much congestion is being caused by the construction, even though it's not located allocate on the freeway as compared to other factors that are causing the congestion? Is there any way that we want to determine the factor?
Yeah, the question for the audience on the computer was just getting at, can we calculate the delay essentially for areas that maybe aren't just necessarily on that corridor of the construction, but other corridors that might be impacted, like in the example of 35E, like Rice Street would be impacted, or somebody's got to take a longer route now. You know, we don't quite have fully that capability. We put temporary sensors on 35E to kind of calculate what the delays are on that corridor. We can certainly look at delays on other parallel freeway corridors, like 694, for example. You know, Jesse mentioned in his PowerPoint presentation that, you know, we're seeing increased congestion on 694 in this last congestion report, but a lot of that's probably traffic spilling over from 35E. So we can measure some of those corridors. To really get down to the unique individual and folks that are now maybe taking different routes, it becomes a little bit more challenging, and we don't really have a good way to really get a hold of that. So, I don't know if you had anything to add.
And for congestion reporting, we use just the freeways for the congestion report. And when there's construction in an area, we leave that, like 35E right now is under construction, has been for a couple of years. We leave the previous congestion measurements before congestion started on there for the years it's under construction. So we don't go, oh, there's no congestion there anymore. Usually we don't have very good instrumentation to say what the congestion is there. So we just kind of leave it in its precondition. Once construction's over, we'll update that area to show improvements or what happens to the congestion patterns. Yes?
Speaking of that last comment, the fact that you don't have instrumentation in a lot of those areas or detection, you don't have detection because the pavement's ripped up. Are there any thought to, I know with one of the projects you are going to be supplementing with instrumentation detection for during the length of the project. Is that going to be more of a standard operating procedure, or is it going to be case by case? What are some thoughts related to detection?
Over the past 3 or 4 years, it's kind of become standard for major road construction projects. So multi-year projects, large impact projects. We've done quite a few. So we've kind of set up contracts where we get temporary detection trailers out there, and we have them right now currently on 35E, on 494 out in Plymouth, Maple Grove, and 100 in St. Louis Park. So those trailers have batteries on them, solar panels, and a detection device. Sometimes we supplement with a camera as well. And we're getting kind of somewhat same spacing that we have with our permanent detectors, so we can provide travel times through the work zones. We also rent portable changeable message signs and put up travel times on those. So we are doing that for the major projects, and in the next year we're going to do one on 94 basically between 35E and 694, and we're going to be putting out changeable message signs and putting up some advisory speed limits on them as well to try to kind of relay some of that information to motorists. So yeah, it's something that has kind of become standard practice to put instrumentation out there to get that information and to provide it to motorists.
Is that getting to be more standard in your special provisions, that if you are taking out instrumentation, you're generally putting in detection? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's kind of its own section that we write up for each different project on what we want, putting in there what type of spacing we want these trailers, what type of technology we want on the trailers. We have some special language so that they can be tied into our existing system. If we didn't do that, we might just get any kind of product that someone wants to offer, and it might not be compatible with all the other detection that we already have. So it's kind of it's a case by case. We're looking at what type of technology to put out there on each project.
We've got a couple too where we've tried to get ahead of that construction project a little bit, rather than getting the contractor to provide those trailers. We'll go start to put out our non-intrusive detection poles for our Wavetronics devices. That's kind of the way we're going, is we're getting away from the loops that are in the pavement, using a Wavetronics radar that's mounted on a post on the side. Well, if we know that project's not going to really have impacts outside the paved area, we can go and put those poles in ahead of time and utilize some of that detection during the construction, because we're ultimately going to go in that direction anyway. If we can put those out early instead of late, we can utilize during the construction. And a lot of times what we've done is instead of utilizing the wavetronics, which needs to be calibrated every time those lanes are adjusted, if we got a project that's going to be doing a lot of traffic switches, we're going to try this next coming year utilizing just Doppler radar sensors. They don't give you the lane-by-lane speeds or the traffic volumes, but they can give you a good speed of traffic, and all they need to know is direction of travel. So it knows if they're heading towards it, it's eastbound, say, and if they're headed away, it's westbound. So if construction goes and does any shifts, our Doppler radars can still calculate those travel times without having to go out and do a bunch of calibration. So it'll be easier to maintain during the construction project. But then we can utilize those devices because they're MnDOT devices. We can utilize them on the next project rather than having to rent them every time.
Yeah, we found with the trailers we have, basically Wavetronics unit, which gets volume, speed, classifies vehicles, all this kind of information, but they're on a trailer with a limited pole height in a ditch looking at construction barriers. So we would get volume numbers back, but we weren't really satisfied that they were accurate volume numbers. So really what we need in the work zone is to know travel time delay. So we just need to know the speed of traffic going in one direction versus the other to get that kind of information. So we've been we supplemented with what we normally have in a permanent site, kind of found out the limitations of that in a construction zone and kind of pared back our specifications, so we only really need that speed by direction information.
Just had a question about your MnPass lanes. You had a % for violations. I was just kind of curious how you guys get such a number, being that not everybody's going to use it, maybe a carpool or something like that. So I'm just kind of curious, is it observation? Is there like some sort of automatic sensor thing? What's going on?
It's purely observation. We have just somebody, we've done it a few times, maybe like once a year, roughly, where we have a couple of people go out and drive in the adjacent general purpose lane. One person's driving and the other person's kind of watching as traffic goes by and takes notes. So it's nothing too scientific. There are some infrared cameras out there that can, see inside the vehicle and count the number of heads type of thing, but none of them are 100% accurate. They're all, I don't know, there's one vendor that now claims that they've gotten it up to 95% accuracy. It's still, truth to be told, that really works that way, but, a lot of them aren't really 100% accurate enough to want to invest in that kind of system. So right now it's just purely naked eyes looking at it and observing it.
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank Brian and Jesse for their great presentation. I'd also like to thank Brian here for the tip that dummy that I got on my side, I have to make sure there's a heat source inside of it.
Some of them can detect skin now, too. They can tell the difference between them.
Okay, so the third Tuesday of the month is when we typically have traffic topics, the third Tuesday at 2, so we got a lot of T's in there. But the third Tuesday at 2 is when we typically have traffic topics. We do not have our next session lined up yet, but I know it's going to be an interesting subject. We got a lot of different ideas that are set aside, and we got some people that we're going to talk to, but we'll have another session next month, and I hope you're able to make it then. I'll just leave it at that. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
So, in my email, I'm regarding the chapter of and I do a session on it. Should I add anything about
Congratulations, though.
detection, or, if you are impacting a route that has detection, you should consider?
Yeah.
Okay.
People kind of expect to have some sort of
Well, travel time is so huge. I mean, the Donna McCorrin, her investigation into that, and Kate, Carla, thank you. The fact that people just kind of know, and they won't have to take a detour as long as they know how long it's going to take to take that route. Huge difference.
Wow. Yeah, it's the same thing when you see someone slow down, you see that car guarding out to see what's up ahead, you know where the show what's going on.
Exactly.
People just want to, oh, okay, it's a little bit slower than normal. I don't have to freak out. What's going on? Am I going to not make it home? Is the road closed?
And, I take
94 in, from 61 I take 94. And whenever there's a crash, like in this big junction area,